Hello and welcome to my channel. Hi, I'm Wendy J. Haney. Today I found this cool block design in one of my quilt books and thought, let's do this one. I thought it was so pretty. And once again, it looks kind of complicated. There's a little bit of a new complication in it, but I know you guys can handle it. Otherwise, it's pretty straightforward. We've got a square and a square, a couple of squares. Oh, and this triangle block thing here that's got angles in it. No biggie though. So this is called the Bachelor's puzzle, and I am working with doing and showing you how to make a 9-inch finished block. Because essentially this is a, excuse me, frog in my throat this morning, not enough coffee. It's actually kind of like 4 across, if you will. Anyway, anything kind of divisible by 3, so you can do a 6, 9, 12. You can probably do an 18. There you go. So lots of different sizes. I will post a link below where you can contact me at wendyjhaney.com and request the template for the measurements of the fabric that you need for the different size blocks and a coloring template. Okay, so middle is a square and a square. We got a couple other squares, and then we've got these triangle angle doohickeys. So what do we need? We need of your lighter colors. I have 4 2.75-inch squares. For our rectangles, this is kind of a medium tone. We need 4 2.75 times 5-inch of those for our rectangles. And to go with those, we need 8, because you need 2, 1 for each side of these, 8 2.75-inch squares of your dark. Then in the middle, you need I've gone with a medium brighter tone in the middle. And this one, I'm going to tell you the size in a minute. And we need some triangles. Here's the deal on the square and a square. I have a video here that you can go watch for 2 different ways to make a square and a square. One of them, you don't need any special rulers, but you will use more fabric. I'm going scrappy here. So we've got scraps. I literally found a bin of scraps left over from a really cool fall colored quilt and decided to use those in this block. So if you're like me and you're using scraps, obviously you want to kind of, optimize what you can get out of those scraps. So you can use the method of using squares, a larger square for the middle, and then squares to put in your corners to get your square and a square. To be honest with you, I struggle with that one sometimes. It doesn't come out as nicely as I would like. This one here, I did do that method. Oh, it's a tad off with my angles there. It's okay, it got the job done, but I do have this ruler that I prefer when I'm making a square and a square, and that is Deb Tucker's Studio 180 Designs Square Squared 1/2 inch. Is it focusing? There we go. Yep, I like this ruler. And because there's other ones, there's square squared, you can't do 1/2 inch. And our square in a square middle here is going to be a 4.5 inch finish. So you need the 1/2 inch version. It's handy dandy because it tells you everything you need to know. It tells you the finished size of your square is 4.5 inch, which means you need 2 3.5 inch squares. So my dark, I had two 3.5 inch squares, and you're going to cut them in half. Yep. So those give you your triangles. And then over here, it tells you what size square you need for the middle. Note in this, it says cut from 3 3/4 inch, so 3.75 inch strips. That is not the size of your square. I incorrectly assumed that once. It is not. So this makes it really easy if you're doing strip cutting to say just cut a piece that is 3.75 inches wide. Then you need to go back So that's what I did with this. You need to go back and take your strips and then put this template on top of it. And yep, I need to trim it up just a tad. So I'm going to trim that to get a perfect, because if you put this ruler up next to another ruler, you'll go, wait a minute, that's not 3.75. It's a really wonky number, which you do not want to have to measure, something eighth or whatever, which is why this ruler is really handy for it. So I'm going to trim that up, but I'm also right now going to show you what we're going to do. So once I have this square exactly the size I need, we're going to take these triangle pieces we've got, and what we're going to do is we're going to put them on two sides of our square. Here's the deal. I like to do it this way, and normally I get anal in particular. Did I say that earlier? Yeah, I have a tendency to do that, which is why I like this method, is to fold this in half and fold that in half and get the middle. No. Other nice thing with this ruler is that you're going to end up with oversized, and you're going to trim it down, which means we can just put that on there. And I like doing it this way so I can see it. And do that. Yep, and I slipped already. Flip it over, get the other side, match them, and then you're going to go to the sewing machine and stitch on 1/4 inch. I'm going to go trim that square and then sew those seams, and I'll be back. So as you can see, we stitched those down. I went to the ironing board afterwards and I pressed them out. Very important at this point to press. Now we're going to put on our other triangles on the other side. Just like before, you're going to eyeball those. And the reason I like to put the square on top of the triangle is because, one, it lets me eyeball it easier and make sure I get my seams matched. So we're going to do that over there, then this over there. We're going to go to the sewing machine, stitch 1/4 inch on each side. I'm going to press them, and then I'm going to come back and show you how to trim them up. And we're going to have a perfect square in a square. And now we have it. There is our square in a square. And yeah, it looks kind of a little ugly, doesn't it? Which is kind of the point of it, because now we bring in our squared 1/2 inch ruler. And over here on the right, it has all of these complicated lines and whatever. The key thing is you need to know that it's a 4.5 inch. So here's our 4.5 inch dotted. That's our 4.5 inch finished block that we've got, which means we're actually trimming it to 5. But the cool thing about this ruler is that 4.5 inch dotted line, that is actually what you put to outline your center square. And lo and behold, when you do this, it looks really good when you get your center square cut the right size. Don't do 3.75. Oops, I did that before because it said a 3.75 strip. You need to then trim that strip up based on this square over here on this side of the ruler, which is complicated to see. Anyway, that's why this ruler is so handy, because this method doesn't work well to just give you measurements, because that middle square is a really wonky number. Okay, so now we're going to put this on here, and the important thing with doing that is setting this ruler here and getting 4.5 inch dotted line around your middle square and getting those X's right at your corners, because that is going to ensure, and depending on your seam, that's going to ensure the situation of this of being turned right and completely square for all your points. And as you can see, we have plenty around the outside to trim. So we're going to trim that, flip it around, and find that 4.5 inch again. And in this case, you'll also want to make sure your line here, which is 5, is even on your outside. And if you do that, it should mean that everything is still squared up in the middle. Unless you had an oops and something slipped. And there we go. We have a perfect, this is a 5-inch unfinished square in a square, but it will be 4.5 inch. There we go. I love that ruler. Can set that aside. Now we're going to work on our rectangles over here. Okay, get your 8 2.75 inch squares and your triangles. Here's the deal. You're going to take these and we're going to mark them corner to corner because you're going to need to mark them. And I always put my ruler just a tad to the left of the corner. That way the width of my mark is actually corner to corner, because otherwise if you put your ruler exactly corner to corner, your line is technically not corner to corner because your line has a width to it. Okay, now here's the kicker. I would suggest you take your template and you pay attention to the orientation of these angles, because oops, somebody didn't do that the last time and my angles are the wrong direction. Oops. Yeah, I thought it'd be just the same. No. So take your rectangle, look at your picture and go, oh, we're gonna want something in the corner there so it flips up that way and I get my angle, and something in the corner here that I flip and get my angle. Okay? I would suggest you do one and make sure you have it right before you do all of them. Here's something. So what I do is you want to do them one at a time. Put that in the corner and then you're going to come and you're going to sew on the line. Here's something a little tricky that I learned somewhere, read it in a book and thought, wow, that's kind of slick. You know, we're always cutting off our triangles on the corners and we have all that waste. Now, with this size, I don't know if I would necessarily do this, but if you took that square and you put your ruler on it and marked another line 1/2 inch from the center. Okay, once again, and I apologize, I'm using batiks. Everything is right sides together. So now if you take this to the sewing machine and you sew on corner to corner, but you also sew that line, when you come back and cut in between those, guess what? All of your little corners, you can turn into these itty bitty ones. I'm really not sure I will ever use those that tiny, but if you're doing the 12-inch block, those could be some nice squares left over. Okay, so we're gonna take this to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch on this line. I'll probably do this one too. And we're gonna come back and then we'll put on the other one. Okay, I actually sewed both stitches there. What I would recommend you do before you cut anything is open this up, do a quick finger press and go, okay, did I get it right? Is it looking good? And do I have my right angle? Don't start lopping off edges until you've confirmed. Once you've confirmed, all's good. Then we're gonna just cut a 1/4 inch essentially in the middle of those two lines. And then you can press this open and that side is done. And then you've got this little tiny 1/2 square triangle. And if you square this baby up, throw it in a bin. They're kind of little. I don't know. I think it's barely 2 inches depending on depending on the angle there. Am I going to get 2 inches? Nope. Nope. An inch, 1.75 inches. Well, since I've got this sitting here, I'm going to just cut it. There you go. Trim up the other side and you have a 1.75 inch half square triangle. Now, with that said, hey, maybe you're putting in sashing that is a 1.5 inch cut. These could be pretty little cornerstones. Just a thought, throw them in your pile. Otherwise, use them as leaders. Okay, got this side done. Now we're going to put our other 2.75 inch square, making sure your angle is this direction. And if you're adding the second line, it is towards the corner that you're going to trim off. So you're going to put that there and pin that. And then, yep, once again, double check. Do we got our angle right? Does it look good? Yep, that one looks good. So I'm going to trim it up. Deal with that later. Okay, there we go. Now we will end up with, you're going to want to press everything. Press all of those. So I'm going to go do this last one and we're going to press that, and then guess what? We have all the pieces we need to put our block together. Yeah, it really wasn't that complicated, right? Yep, so stay tuned and we'll get it put together. This is where the use of partial seams will come into play. And there we have it. We're ready to put this block together. Well, we're going to put our square and the square in the middle. And what I usually do is put my light colored right around the corner. So it goes above that block, to the right of this block, below this block, and there. So kind of every other around. Then we're going to put our rectangles in, and wanting to make sure your dark is next to your dark triangle. Just like this. Okay, and I'm sure you're looking at that going, how do we sew that together? How do we make that work? What we're going to do is attach our light squares to each of our rectangles. So we're going to do that. And yes, they're batiks. You can't tell right side from wrong side. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Looks like I screwed up here with the cutting of that square. Not so square. I will have to really hope I have another piece of that fabric. Cutting errors do happen. And, oh, son of a biscuit. Wow. Wow. I better go check my measuring. Okay, anyway. I'm going to go check my squares before I sew them. But you're going to sew your light squares onto your rectangles. Go and get that done. I'm going to go remeasure and trim my squares and make sure they're square before I start putting them together. Yep, I goofed. I did this multiple times yesterday and cut 2.5 inch strips or 2.5 inch squares when I meant to do 2.75 inch. I don't know why I didn't get out my little tape. This tape is so cool. You put it on your ruler right where next to the size that you need, so you don't have to double check every time. I really wanted a dark brown in here, and I had a strip that would have been perfect. Well, and then I screwed it up, so that was gone, so I had to find something else, and anyway, been there, done that, I'm sure. So we have a little bit different color. I'm disappointed because I was really hoping I could get at least 2, maybe 3 blocks that were identical and make a table runner. Guess that isn't going to happen because there's not enough left of this color either. All right, sorry, back to it. I pressed that seam and I pressed it. Even though this is my lighter color, I pressed it that way to give less bulk here in my corners. Okay, now here is where your partial seams come in, because as you can see, you can't, yeah. So what we're gonna do is I start at the top and I go this way. We're gonna put this on here, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna stitch it, but we're gonna stop, I'd say 3/4 of an inch, a 1/2 inch away from the corner. You do what you feel's best. Last time I did a 1/2 inch and thought, oh, you know, I might want a little more to be able to move stuff out of the way. It really doesn't matter. Heck, you could go all the way back to here if you wanted. The thing is that we're going to stitch and then you're going to stop. Then you can open this up and get it out of the way while you put this one on. And then you're going to stitch this part way down. Then you can press this out, and now you've got a full seam there where we can come back and put this over top of it and finish the seam. I know. So let's start with one thing at a time. I actually prefer to have my square and a square on top so I can do a better job of not cutting off that corner. So in that case, we're going to put this on top here, and yes, get out your ruler, I don't care. Here's a marker. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of go, you know what, I'm going to stop sewing there. I'm actually giving myself an inch, you know, because it really doesn't matter. Here though, if you look at our finished block, our corners here want to meet, the corner of your square and a square should match up with the seam of this. So I had some fun with that when I did my first one. So I'm going to take a pin and put it right there where the seams on my corner are and bring it back through, and then make sure that, okay, that lines up with my seam. Did I do okay? Yep. And of course, keeping your seam matched here. So I am going to pin that. I'm going to pin that. I'm going to pin that. So this way, I'm going to take it to my sewing machine. I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch, and I'm going to stop right there where I've marked it. Put a pin there, mark whatever works for you to know, stop, don't sew any further. Let's do that. Okay, I have that sewn and I stopped here. I have on my sewing machine a little dot that I can just tap, and it does like a double stitch, if you will. Not exactly a back stitch, but I just do 1 or 2 of those there to secure that. And then, as you can see here, I didn't sew all the way to the end. Okay, don't press it at this time. We're going to come back here, and we're going to bring over our piece that goes here. Okay? Now, you're going to move that aside and put this over on top of it. And as I said, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it over. And actually, this is working better. Giving myself a full inch is way better than what I was doing before, which was over only a 1/2 inch. It makes it easier to get this out of the way. You're going to want to be very careful about this. Get this other piece out of your way of your sewing machine so you don't sew over top of it, or you will be very unhappy. Once again, I'm going to get my pin into that seam. And yep, okay, we're good. I want to make sure that intersects with my seam, so I'm going to pin that, pin my corner, and then once again, I'm going to just, actually, look at there, on my ruler mat, I just go, yep, there's my inch, and I'm going to mark that. So once again, we're going to sew from your corner to your mark, a 1/4 of an inch. Now we have 2 floppy seams. Yep, we got this one. So now This is secured up here, so we're in a position to fold that down and finish our seam. So what you want to do is go to the ironing board, and in this case press, yeah, actually you could press the whole thing. Press that open, then you're going to bring this over top of it and make sure that it's even and pin that and be able to sew that from where you left off over to the edge. Okay? So you can sew that, and then I'm going to unpin that for now. Now down here we have the same situation as we had before. We left it open, so in this case we're going to put this this strip over here, and I always do it this way from the front so I know I've got it laid out right. I put it there and then I flip it over so that I can see and line my seam up with that. I'm gonna get that all lined up and right, and then you can take this to the sewing machine. Yeah, there we go. Take, pin this and take this to the sewing machine. Once again, marking at a good mark to be able to stop. So you can sew this, your 1/4 inch. You can finish up this one, your 1/4 inch, and then we're on to the last side. Okay, now this seam is completely sewn. This one's on with my little flag, so I was able to sew this one on, stopping before the end. And now we're going to, just like up here, we're going to get this one over top of this. And as you'll notice, then it's like, oh, my seams are funky. It's like, that's okay. So get that matched there. Pin this so you can sew that. Now, when you're connecting your seams here, so you're going to sew this and you're going to get to where you stopped, do a few stitches past where you stopped before, and then because you're not ending on an end, you're going to want to do a back stitch or a double tap to lock that stitch in, and then making sure those stitches, those ones, are right on top of each other so you don't have it out of line. Okay, so we've got that, and then we've got our final one here that we're going to put here. Get that out of the way. And you know what we're going to do. We're going to match things up, match my seams, stitch this. Yes, all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute, I got this cream thing. Yeah, that's good. That's good. This one is longer. It threw me for a minute. This one is longer because before I kept marking on the brown and I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Well, this is longer because you're at the end. This is the first strip that you put on. All is good. We're gonna mark there, and that white on white, just don't cut it. Yeah, we're gonna use a fusion pen that is iron off to mark that. Okay, so go get this seam sewed. Get this seam sewed, and then we'll be able to sew the last one, and oh my gosh, it's going to be done. There we have it. And oh, by the way, when you get to this last one and I go, oh, it's cream and you have to mark it, no you don't. Because when you hit this, when you've got a strip on it, that means you're done and you can do one seam all the way across. And there we have it. I'll have to admit, I think I like my original one better with the not so light, but this one works too. Go with it. I think this will make a very pretty quilt. And now I've got a couple blocks to do a, I don't know, random block quilt or something, because let me tell you, I have a lot of random blocks. Okay, there you go. That is the Bachelor's puzzle. And I have a link below. You can contact me to get the template for it with all the size information for a no, not a 3-inch block, 6, 9, and a 12-inch block. Hope you enjoyed that. Thank you so much for watching. Take care and happy quilting.